The lights do not fade when a nationwide blackout begins. They vanish. One moment, the electrical grid is an invisible architecture sustaining every system that modern life depends on. In the next, it is gone, collapsing into silence with no warning sound, no visible fracture, no dramatic signal beyond the sudden absence of power. Elevators freeze between floors. Water pumps stop mid-cycle. Traffic signals fall dark across entire cities. Refrigeration ceases. Communication networks begin their countdown toward failure. What follows is not immediate chaos, but something far more dangerous: a cascading systems failure governed by physics, infrastructure design, and human dependency. The first 72 hours determine survival, yet the true risks during this period remain widely misunderstood, hidden not by secrecy, but by complexity. The science of grid failure reveals a sequence of predictable threats that unfold with mechanical certainty, and those who understand this sequence gain a decisive advantage. A nationwide blackout is not simply a loss of electricity, it is the shutdown of a synchronized machine that operates at continental scale. Modern power grids function through constant balance between supply and demand, maintaining precise frequency stability, typically around 50 or 60 Hz, depending on the region. When a disturbance spreads beyond control, protective systems disconnect generation assets to prevent physical destruction of turbines and transformers. This protective behavior, designed to save infrastructure, produces a cascading collapse. Transmission lines trip offline, power plants isolate themselves, and entire regions disconnect within seconds. Evidence from major historical outages demonstrates that recovery is slow because restarting a grid requires a process known as black start capability, in which small, independent power sources gradually reactivate large generating stations. Few facilities possess this capability, and each restart depends on stable transmission pathways that may no longer exist. The survival implication of this technical reality is severe. Restoration is not measured in hours, but potentially days or weeks, depending on damage and system instability. Yet public perception assumes rapid recovery because most people experience only localized outages where external regions supply replacement power. A nationwide failure removes that redundancy. There is no unaffected region to compensate. The hidden principle is systemic interdependence. Electricity is the foundational layer supporting water distribution, fuel supply, communications, healthcare operations, and food preservation. When power disappears, these systems do not fail simultaneously, but collapse in sequence according to their internal reserves and backup capacity. Water infrastructure represents one of the first critical vulnerabilities. Urban water systems rely on electrically powered pumps to maintain pressure across distribution networks. Treatment facilities require continuous energy for filtration, chemical dosing, and pathogen control. Emergency generators may sustain operations briefly, but these generators depend on stored fuel that typically lasts between 8 and 24 hours under full load. Once pumping stops, pressure declines gradually, and the system becomes vulnerable to contamination through backflow intrusion. Microorganisms, sediments, and environmental pollutants can enter pipelines when pressure drops below critical thresholds. The water emerging from taps during a prolonged blackout may appear clear, while carrying biological hazards invisible to the eye. The common misunderstanding is that stored municipal water remains safe indefinitely after a power outage. In reality, safety depends on pressure integrity and active treatment processes. Without electricity, chlorine residuals degrade, microbial growth accelerates, and distribution systems lose protection against infiltration. The hidden science involves fluid dynamics and microbiology. Water networks function as closed systems only while pressure is maintained. Once that pressure fails, contamination pathways open throughout the network simultaneously. Food preservation follows a similarly misunderstood timeline. Refrigerators maintain safe temperatures for approximately 4 hours without power if unopened, while freezers may preserve contents for 1 to 2 days, depending on insulation and fill level. After this period, bacterial proliferation accelerates exponentially within perishable items. Pathogenic organisms such as Salmonella and Escherichia coli multiply rapidly in warming environments, producing toxins that cannot be neutralized by later cooking. The danger is not immediately visible. Food may retain normal appearance and odor while becoming biologically hazardous. This leads to a predictable escalation. As refrigeration fails nationwide, food supply chains experience synchronized spoilage. Warehouses lose temperature control. Transportation networks halt due to fuel pump failures. Retail distribution collapses. The population begins consuming compromised food resources, increasing gastrointestinal illness precisely when medical services face operational constraints. The intersection of microbiology and infrastructure failure produces a secondary crisis: widespread illness emerging from degraded food safety systems. Healthcare infrastructure reveals another critical layer of vulnerability. Hospitals maintain backup generators designed to sustain essential operations, yet these systems prioritize life support equipment, surgical facilities, and critical care units. Non-essential services are curtailed immediately. Diagnostic equipment, climate control in general wards, and electronic record systems may become unavailable. Fuel logistics determine the duration of hospital functionality. Diesel reserves stored on site must be replenished through transportation networks that themselves depend on electricity for pumping and distribution. The overlooked principle here is energy density versus consumption rate. Large medical facilities consume vast quantities of power, and even substantial fuel reserves provide limited operational time. As generator fuel diminishes, healthcare providers face triage conditions driven not by patient volume alone, but by energy scarcity. The medical system transitions from comprehensive care to survival operations within hours, altering treatment standards and response capacity. Communication networks degrade according to similar energy constraints. Cellular towers possess battery backups, typically designed for several hours of operation. Data centers supporting internet services rely on generators, but require continuous fuel supply. As backup power declines, network coverage shrinks progressively, creating informational isolation. Individuals lose access to emergency guidance, coordination channels, and real-time updates. The psychological impact of communication loss amplifies uncertainty and behavioral instability. Human behavior under conditions of uncertainty follows well-documented patterns studied in disaster psychology. Initial compliance and cooperation often give way to anxiety-driven decision-making when reliable information disappears. Resource acquisition behavior intensifies. Movement increases. Crowding occurs at remaining operational facilities. These behavioral responses place additional strain on limited infrastructure, accelerating system degradation. The interaction between psychological response and physical scarcity forms a feedback loop that intensifies crisis conditions. Battery storage systems provide silent power, but possess limited capacity relative to household demand. Without strict load management, stored energy depletes rapidly. The physics of energy consumption dictates that high-wattage devices, such as heating elements and refrigeration units, exhaust reserves quickly. Effective use requires prioritization of essential functions, a discipline rarely practiced under normal conditions. Transportation failure introduces spatial vulnerability. Elevators halt, trapping occupants. Electric rail systems stop instantly, immobilizing commuters. Traffic congestion intensifies as signal systems fail. Emergency response vehicles encounter obstructed routes, delaying assistance. Urban environments designed for efficiency under powered conditions become structurally restrictive when energy disappears. The transition from technological dependence to manual operation demands physical readiness. Individuals must carry water, navigate without digital guidance, and maintain hygiene without automated systems. These requirements impose metabolic costs that increase caloric demand, while food availability decreases. The body enters a state of resource conservation, affecting strength and cognitive clarity. Psychological resilience becomes a measurable survival factor. Research in extreme environments demonstrates that individuals who understand system behavior maintain composure and allocate resources more effectively. Knowledge reduces panic-driven consumption and enables strategic planning. The hidden advantage of scientific understanding lies not merely in information, but in behavioral stability. As the blackout persists into the second day, infrastructure degradation reaches critical thresholds. Water reserves diminish. Communication networks fragment. Medical facilities restrict intake. Environmental conditions intensify physiological stress. The population begins to recognize that restoration is not imminent, and behavioral patterns shift from temporary adjustment to survival adaptation. The third day represents a decisive boundary where biological needs, infrastructure failure, and psychological strain converge. Dehydration risk escalates sharply. Sanitation conditions deteriorate. Illness incidence rises. External assistance may still be mobilizing, but individual resilience determines outcomes during this interval. Understanding these processes reveals a central truth. Survival during a nationwide blackout depends on anticipating system failure before visible crisis emerges. The absence of electricity is merely the initial signal of a deeper structural collapse unfolding according to predictable scientific principles.